welcome back to my channel. My name is Organic Bee, and today I wanted to read a chapter out of Bell Hooks, all about love, new visions. This chapter 8, is called Community Loving Communion, and I thought it was really interesting how she went about discussing community, so I just wanted to share it with you guys. It says, community cannot take root in a divided life. Long before community assumes external shape and form, it must be present as a seed in the undivided self. Only as we are in communion with ourselves can we find community with others. And that's written by Parker Palmer. To ensure human survival everywhere in the world, females and males organize themselves into communities. Communities sustain life, not nuclear families or quote-unquote the couple, and certainly not the rugged individualists. There is no better place to learn the art of loving than in community. M. Scott Peck begins his book, The Different Drum, Community Making in Peace, with the profound declaration, in and through community lies the salvation of the world. Peck defines community as the coming together of a group of individuals who have learned how to communicate honestly with each other, whose relationships go deeper than their mass of composure, and who have developed some significant commitment to rejoice together, mourn together, and to delight in each other and make others' conditions our own. We are all born into the world of community. Rarely, if ever, does a child come into the world in isolation with only one or two onlookers. Children are born into a world surrounded by the possibility of communities. Family, doctors, nurses, midwives, and even admiring strangers comprise this field of connection, some more intimate than others. Much of the talk about family values, quote-unquote, in our society highlights the nuclear family, one that is made up of mother, father, and preferably one or two children. In the United States, this unit is presented as the primary and preferable organization for the parenting of children, one that will ensure everyone's optimal well-being. Of course, this is a fantasy image of family. Hardly anyone in our society lives in an environment like this. Even individuals who are raised in nuclear families usually experience it as merely a small unit within a larger unit of extended kin. Capitalism and patriarchy together as structures of domination have worked over time to undermine and destroy this larger unit of extended kin. Replacing the family community with a more privatized, small, aristocratic unit helped increase alienation and made abuses of power more possible. It gave absolute rule to the father and secondary rule over the children to the mother. By encouraging the segregation of nuclear families from the extended family, women were forced to become more dependent on an individual man, and children were more dependent on an individual woman. It is this dependency that became and is breeding the ground for abuses of power. The failure of the patriarchal nuclear family has been utterly documented. Exposed as dysfunctional more often than not as a place of emotional chaos, neglect, and abuse, only those in denial continue to insist that this is the best environment for raising children. While I do not want to suggest that extended families are not as likely to be dysfunctional, simply by virtue of their size and their inclusion of non-blood kin, examples, individuals who marry into the family and their blood relations, they are diverse and so are likely to include the presence of some individuals who are both sane and loving. When I first began to speak publicly about my dysfunctional family, my mother was enraged. To her, my achievements were a sign that I could not have suffered that much in our nuclear family. That much is quote-unquote. Yet I know I survived and thrived despite the pain of childhood precisely because there were loving individuals among our extended family who nurtured me and gave me a sense of hope and possibility. They showed that our family's interactions did not constitute a norm, that there were other ways to think and behave different from the accepted patterns in our household. This story is common. Surviving and triumphing over dysfunctional nuclear families may depend on the presence of what psychoanalyst Alice Miller calls enlightened witnesses. Particularly, every adult who experienced unnecessary suffering in childhood has a story to tell about someone whose kindness, tenderness, and concern restored their sense of hope. This could only happen because families existed as part of larger communities. The privatized patriarchal nuclear family is still a fairly recent form of social organization in the world. Most world citizens do not have and will never have the material resources to live in small units segregated from larger family communities. In the United States, studies show that economic factors, the high costs of housing, unemployment, are swiftly creating a cultural climate in which grown children are leaving the family home later and are frequently returning or never leaving in the first place. Research by anthropologists and sociologists indicates that small privatized units, especially those organized around patriarchal thinking, are unhealthy environments for everyone. Globally, enlightened, healthy parenting is best realized within the context of community and extended family networks. The extended family is a good place to learn the power of community. However, it can only be a community if there is honest communication between the individuals in it. Dysfunctional extended family, like smaller nuclear family units, are usually characterized by muddied communication. Keeping family secrets often makes it impossible for extended groups to build community. There was once an advertisement that used the slogan, quote-unquote, "The family that prays together stays together." Since prayer is one way to communicate, it is no doubt does help. Since prayer is one way to communicate, it is no doubt does help family members stay connected. I remember hearing this slogan as a teenager, usually in situations where authority figures were coercing us to pray, and changing it to, quote-unquote, "The family that talks together stays together." Talking together is one way to make community. And the chapter goes on and on. But I just wanted to read that small part because I think it is very important that as we come together as a community, you have to remember that it starts with an individual. And you can't have community without working on yourself first so that you could be a valuable part of the community. So that chapter was very enlightening because when you think about community, you mostly just think about a group of people, but it begins with the self, and it begins with coming to a realization that everybody grows and learns at their own pace. So as we get to know people and build with people and we do come together, you have to remember everybody has their own certain strength and everybody has their own certain weakness. So it's just beginning to understand that if you want to come together as a community, we have to accept everybody for how they are as an individual. And that could mean sometimes hearing somebody out when they have a different opinion than you, or sometimes it could be simply learning about somebody's way of living that could be different from yours. So I think it's very important that we listen to bell hooks and become more community orientated, because a lot of people are lost in this world and they're alone, and just taking a moment to learn about what somebody needs and possibly learn about how you could help them could bring a huge difference in the dynamic in the world. We could all help each other once we begin helping ourselves, because once you are set and you have a better mindset about life, you're able to help more people. And so that becomes a goal. Helping people should be your number one goal in life, because people need people. And I learned that very young. People need people, and it's not ever going to change. People are mentally and physically built to be in a community, and you're mentally and physically built to be surrounded by other people, but it begins with self. You need to be mentally well in order to interact with different types of personalities. And I think that is where a lot of people have social anxiety and just don't know how to go about being a valuable asset in the community. And I heard this saying all my life. My dad said, leave a place better than you found it. So that is always my end goal when I start a new job or any new opportunity that's presented to me in life. I take it as an opportunity to make that place better than I found it. Even if I don't stay, because that's not realistic. You can't stay every place that you enter, and as a young adult, I'm learning that. And so while you may think this is temporary, this place you've entered, you still make an impression, and your first impression is everything, but it's not always what people remember you by. So if you don't make an awesome first impression, you do have other opportunities to make that situation better. And when you join a new community, you usually feel a little iffy, awkward at first, but you find your place. And that's what I feel like is so important when you're building community, is finding where you fit in so you could help. Finding a place where you fit in, where you know your power and your strength and your talents that you hold will be valuable. That's all people want, is to feel valuable, to feel needed. And if you know what you bring to the table, you have to let others know. And it doesn't have to be in an egotistical way. It just is saying, hey, like, this is what I could do for the community. This is what I could do for your business if you're looking for a job. And that's what stems community is as an individual, what do you bring to the table? As an individual, how can you contribute and make this community better? So community is so important for the mental, because sometimes if you don't feel like you fit in, it could put a damper on your spirit, and that's not always a fun feeling. So as we start rebuilding, getting back to humaning, because I know we've all been separated, stagnant, but as we start to make the transition, I don't want to say normalcy, because I'm not sure if anything's ever going to be normal again, but we do need to continue to move forward, is how I'm going to phrase this. And in order to continue moving forward, everybody has to work on themselves, and everybody has to own their part of the responsibility of being a community. So let's together as a community come together and talk. We need to discuss how we're going to go about the future, and we actually need to follow that action plan. And if you find that you are not fitting well into your community, there's always ample opportunity to find a new community. It is all personal. Everybody brings their own talents to the table. Everybody brings their own mindset, their own set of thinking, and it all goes back to the individual. What values do you hold? What morals do you hold? What standards do you have? And does that community you're joining reflect that? Could that be an opportunity for you to grow or help others grow? You have to think about opportunities in that way. And sometimes being selfish could hinder you. If you find that you're in a dead-end job, okay, so be it. A lot of people work dead-end jobs, but while you're there, until you move forward, how can you help that community? How can you help that community be better or stay afloat? Or how can you change that dynamic until you can get a new place to spend your time? So it's thinking that way. It's thinking, okay, I know this isn't the best place for me to be. I'm giving myself this amount of time, but while I'm here, what can I do to make my situation better? In order to think community, you have to think individual. What am I doing to contribute to the environment? How can I make it better? Once people start working on themselves, we all can come together and work collectively. And that's all I have to say. I hope this video has helped anybody at all. I just thought this chapter was very interesting because you don't really think of individual when you think of community. So when Bell Hooks broke it down like that, I was like, wow, like, she's right. Children need a whole lot of love from a whole bunch of people, but it has to be the right people, and it has to be a community who sees the benefit in all raising that child. So, and that goes with everybody. If you see somebody and you notice that they're slacking a little bit, they're not really on a certain level, and you know the expectation, help that person. Be more selfless. Selfish will not really get you far, but selfless could take you really far. And I think that was her end goal in this chapter, was, yes, community is multiple people coming together, but it starts with the self. So let's all keep that in the back of our mind. We are constantly being tested by God, and the end test is, how did you live your life on earth? How did you make this place a better place while you were here? How did you every day as an individual grow so you could teach somebody who might not know? You know?